Essex and Thurrock Children's Therapy Programme, and this session is for parents and those that support parents and carers in relation to children's therapy. Thank you for joining us. So the agenda, we're just going to have a very quick introduction of what we're doing here. And as I said, we've got Essex County Council here today. We've got Ros representing the NHS that covers across Essex, the whole of Essex, Set Essex, as you might hear that terminology today. And we've got the 3 parent carers here to talk to you today. We're going to have a little bit of a discussion about the role of therapy, which alludes to the conversation that we had as we joined. We're going to be talking to you, the 3 parent carer forums are going to be talking to you about their involvement in the project and how we're representing parent and carers' views. We're then going to hear from Marie and I'm assuming Kate and Ros a little bit as well around the Therapies programme and what work has been happening and where we are. And then, as I said, we're going to have a Q&A at the end. So there will be an opportunity for you to ask some questions. So please feel free to hold on to the end. But if there is anything that you need to know or you're not understanding something that's been said, pop a comment in the chat and one of our someone will come back to you and we'll either let you know that we'll be covering that in the Q&A or they will arrange for that question to be answered. So I hope that covers. Yeah.
Sorry, can I interrupt you quickly? We just had a comment in the chat that just says that the parent would prefer to not have responses recorded if they identify their child, and I didn't know whether you wanted to just address how that would be dealt with.
That's fine. What I would say is please don't make any reference to your child or young person's name. Any questions we will generally be doing on Menti, so you'll be just writing any information. If there is a specific question that you do want to ask that you don't feel comfortable with doing, we're going to give you our email addresses at the end, so you can drop me an email and we can help you that way. Today is going to be an information session, so this is going to be about the work that we're doing as a whole across Set Essex. We're not necessarily going to be answering individual questions about specific cases, but we can certainly signpost you and support you to be asking those questions to the right people. And our email addresses are going to be at the end, so do feel free to use those and contact us, and we'll be able to support you with any questions that way. But yes, of course, please do be mindful of using children and young people's names. We certainly won't be using them as presenters, and we will make every endeavour to if they are mentioned, to remove them as part of as before we put the recording on. Kiri is our comms whiz, and I'm sure she will be already making sure that that's already in place. So that's our agenda. I hope that makes some sense to you. And because time is precious and we've only got you for an hour and an hour's more, we're just going to move on very quickly. So I just really want to bring in, we had this conversation about as we joined, and for those of you that have joined since, we asked what the role of the therapist was in supporting your child. So I'm going to very much invite yes Hannah, just because the thing is we're going to putting the recording on the there's a question, will we be able to see the recording? Absolutely, we are going to be putting the recording on our website, and it will be shared with the 3 parent care forums, and people will be able to use it to dip in, and the slides will be shared as well. So please, if you're wanting that as well, the slides will be shared. Just give us a little bit of time to make sure that we're confidential in popping it.
Jo, you've just knocked yourself on mute.
Been well, isn't it? It's going well. It's very professional. So we're gonna start the discussion. So I'm going to bring up the comments from the first part of the discussion that we joined, and I'm going to welcome Kate Martin, who is the Essex County Council lead for this project, and she's representing all local authorities. Ros French, who is our lead covering the NHS, and I'm presuming Marie Gascoigne, is she not here yet? Well, she's here. There she is. Anne Marie, who is representing the balance system here today. So I'm going to bring up some of your comments, and I'm going to leave them, just going to really let them sort of really talk to you about what the role of the therapist is. And these are some of the comments that came up. So if I leave it with you ladies to let us know what you think. I'll start with the top bit. So we've got some comments here. So people have talked about that the role of the therapist is to carry out interventions and to steer school staff and parents in provision for the child as per the HCP interventions. That was clear. And some people talked about what type of therapists there were. So I don't know how you wanted to do it. Do you want me to pick out a few comments and you answer them, or do you want to just have a general chat about what you think therapy is?
So, what do you think, Marie? How should we tackle this? I think, is there something about going through kind of the general therapy? So for everybody, Marie is the therapist in the room.
Yes, thank you.
So as we said, so I've introduced myself properly. So my name's Kate Martin. I am the SEND provision lead here at Essex County Council. Well, actually not here at Essex County Council. This is my spare bedroom. But at Essex County Council, and we've been working on this project now for a number of years throughout the COVID pandemic. And we've been working with Marie. So Marie, I'll introduce you formally. Marie is the Director of Better Communications, KIC, and she has been commissioned by Essex County Council, Southend Borough Council, Thurrock Unitary Council, and I'm not even going to list all of the clinical commissioning groups because there's quite a lot of us. And she's been commissioned by the Southend Essex and Thurrock local authority and health footprint to come in and help us unpick the therapy delivery for Southend Essex and Thurrock. So in doing that role, Marie comes with a wealth of experience, which I will let her blow her own trumpet in a minute. But she comes with a wealth of experience that has started life as a therapist. So in answering this, I am wondering, I'm getting distracted by the chat, sorry. I'm thinking maybe we hand over to Marie and I stop talking.
Thank you, Kate. So hello, everybody, and thank you for letting me join you today. So as Kate says, I am a speech and language therapist. That's my type of therapy background. But I worked in the NHS for the best part of 20 years and also in academia before I started doing some of this advisory work. And I worked with colleagues. In my former NHS role, I was an AHP lead. So I was also responsible in a London trust for children's occupational therapy and physiotherapy. But in this project, they're not with us today, but we've also had a number of colleagues involved from those other backgrounds. So we're not just bringing, I'm here as a speech and language therapist, but I'm here to talk more broadly about the work that we're doing and the approach that we've been taking. But there've been other colleagues involved on the ground working with the local teams and the systems at large. So the one problem I've got, Jo, is, and I'm not very good on mentees. At the moment, I can see the questions, the first few, but I can see that there is 17 responses and I'm not seeing 17 questions. So maybe if we, all right, okay, you're in control, got it.
Yeah,
okay.
It's
fine.
I think it would be really good to perhaps clarify what services that this therapy project is covering.
Yeah.
That seems to be a theme, because we've got some comments here around mental health. So that might be a good one, and then we can maybe pick out a few comments, Marie, and I can read them out to the group, and perhaps you can answer them.
Super. So if I just do a very, very quick recap of what we've been asked to do then. So the first big part of the work was, as Kate said, unpicking what the current state of the nation is, if you like, across this very large footprint and very complicated footprint, because there are so many different organisations involved in commissioning or buying or making sure that the therapy provision that you need as parents and your children and young people need is available. And also understanding why there might be differences in what's available in different parts of that big footprint across the whole of Essex and Thurrock and Southend. So our first year of work was really spent understanding that and drilling into some of the information that was available, asking for information that wasn't available readily, and actually asking some quite difficult questions of the system to actually understand it better. And we pulled all of that together a few months ago started to feed that back into the system. Jo and colleagues from the other family forums have been involved in regular meetings that we've been part of all the way through this. So they've had, if you like, been on the journey with us as we've come to understand a little bit more about the detail, but also ask some of those questions about, well, why is that like that over here and it's different over there? That doesn't make sense. You know, can we understand that a little bit better? So we've been then in the more recent few weeks and months been working with the therapy teams, and by therapy teams we mean the speech and language therapists, the occupational therapists and the physiotherapists working with children and young people specifically, employed by the various different NHS provider organisations across that big footprint. And they have been able to send representatives to work together to think about, well, actually, we now understand better where the needs are across the footprint, and they're not the same everywhere. There's different numbers of children and young people in different parts of that system. There's different levels of need in terms of the different therapies. So we've been talking about how we can get a response to that for the whole Essex footprint that is aiming to be fair in terms of outcomes, and also being quite key about flagging up where things are not going as they should be and what can be done about that. So that work is going on at the moment, and this session today is really about having that engagement with you as a group of parents in terms of hearing directly from you, so that can feed into that work at this very key moment in time. So is that enough of a sort of general picture, do you think, Jo, Kate?
Yeah, I think we just wanted to really clarify. I think that it's good to just to clarify on here that the main services that we're going to be talking about today is that occupational therapy, and you might see the word OT. So for those of you that might not be familiar with the acronyms that are used, we're going to talk about OT, which is occupational therapy. We're going to be talking about physio, and we're going to be talking about speech and language. So those are the three main areas that we are going to be talking about. And I think, as you've alluded to, Maureen, I think what people are putting in here and some of the chat is when we're talking about therapy, it's about understanding the different levels. So we've got that universal part, the targeted part, and everybody's got different sections of that. So I think what would be really great perhaps is if we start the presentation, and we're going to be going through really a bit more in depth, and then if we've got any more questions at the end of the session, if we're going to save them from there, and then if we haven't covered anything in the session, then hopefully Marie will be able to clarify with that with you. Kate and Roz, is that sound like a plan? Okay, so I'm sorry you get to hear me to speak just very briefly again. So I'm just going to come to parent carer forums here. So for those of you that don't know, Parent Carer Forum is an organisation that's funded by the DFE, and we for a grant, and that's administered by Contact for Families for Disabled Children. And every local authority has its own Parent Carer Forum, and we are independent. I think that's the first thing to make really clear. We are an independent organisation. We are not subject to control from the local authority or from an NHS organisation, and we have been involved. So there's 3 parent care forums that cover Essex, Southend and Thurrock, and you might hear the term a lot today, SET Essex, and SET Essex is the acronym for Southend, Essex and Thurrock. So you might start to hear that terminology a little bit today. I'm just going to talk very briefly about Essex Family Forum, and then I'm going to welcome my colleagues from Southend and Thurrock, and they're going to just let you know, because this project has gone on in periods of different stages. So I'm going to let you know what we've been doing. So as Essex Family Forum, we met and started having conversations with Kate and Marie way back in the summer of 2019, when we were actually able to meet face to face prior to COVID, and we all had to start working virtually. And we started to look at speech and language therapy, physiotherapy and the occupational therapy provision. And we have been working with them since that period of time, and then the programme the programme officially started with regards to the work in September 2020, and we have work very closely by going out and speaking to our parents through our virtual graffiti wall. We've done some parent engagement sessions with Marie and her team, and Southend Parent Carer Forum, which took place in early 2021. And we really used that feedback to help Marie understand the current position, and she'll be talking a little bit about the work and how she's got to where she will later on in the session. And we continue, as Marie has alluded to already, we continue to feedback parents and carers' experiences, and that really informs that we have those discussions in our in some of the meetings that we have. So I just want to hand over to Sam. Sam, if you want to explain your bit about how you've been involved in the programme.
Of course. Good morning, everyone. So my name's Sam. I'm from Southend Family Independent Forum. Sorry, put my teeth in this morning and be able to speak. Apologies. So we came on board in early 2021. And we joined with Essex Family Forum as part of the parent engagement sessions and the family surveys that were being conducted at that time. So we've helped feedback on behalf of the Southend families who are using the services that Jo mentioned about their experiences so far, what their positives have been and what the areas of improvement could be. So we've continuously fed that into the working project that is still ongoing. And we also collect feedback through our surveys on our Facebook page and through our website and through our parent coffee mornings as well. So anytime anybody gives us any feedback, we're constantly making sure that that's fed into the working team here. And we continue to represent Southend families.
Thank you, Sam. And Faye, did you want to come and explain Thurrock's Send Family Forum's involvement? Hi, Faye. Oh, you're on mute. We should play You're on Mute bingo, shouldn't we?
sorry, chatting away. Hello everyone, I'm Faye Spencer. I'm Vice Chair of Thurrock Send Family Forum, Thurrock PCF. My colleague Natasha Colley and Teresa have been involved. Oh, am I still here?
Yeah, we can hear you.
My screen's gone blank, sorry. So they've been involved working with Essex and Southend on this project. I haven't been directly involved. I'm just here presenting today because they've got other commitments they can't attend. So we're very new to the project. Natasha's been involved in discussions, but we've formally joined recently. We are to attend, we have parent coffee mornings, and we do surveys online, so we'll carry on doing that. And if any Thurrock parents or any Thurrock professionals on here that want to find out more about what we're going to be doing, our email will be on there at the end, and then you can contact us. Am I still here?
Yeah, that's brilliant.
Oh, sorry, my screen's
Thank
doing all sorts of things. I don't know if I'm talking to myself. So yeah, we'll be having a lot more involvement, asking parents and carers for their feedback. And working alongside Southend and Essex. So if there's any questions towards the end or you want to get a hold of us, our email address will be at the end and you can do that.
That's lovely. Thank you, Faye.
Thank you.
And I think that it's really important to let you know Thurrock actually joined the project only recently. So the project was proceeding with Southend and Essex, and Thurrock have actually decided to join the project. So we're operating slightly different. It wasn't that Thurrock wasn't involved, it's that they've joined the project slightly later than Essex and Southend. And so as soon as they've joined, obviously we've welcomed our parent carer colleagues onto those conversations to ensure that the voices of parents and carers from Thurrock are heard within that process. So we've talked about co-production a little bit and how we work co-productively with our colleagues in the NHS and our local authorities. So co-production is a core principle of how all parent carer forums work. We believe that co-production should be evident in not just giving information, but how we plan the services, how the services are implemented, the delivery, the evaluation and the monitoring of the services. And we're very much part of those meetings as we form part of the steering group, and we're involved in many of the task and finish groups that sit beneath that are looking towards the planning and the implementation of the work. So the balance system is an existing framework, so we're not starting with that blank sheet of paper that a lot of people talk about with co-production, but we are starting with an existing service and a very established and well-respected piece of framework that has been implemented very successfully in other parts of the country, and we have been involved in that strategic co-production and the planning, and all of the feedback that we do collate has been passed to Marie, and we continue to represent feedback as we continue, and has been used as part of the process and the mapping and looking at what is needed. So that's all been used by Marie as part of that. And Essex because we recognise within Essex that many services are now set Essex. Essex Family Forum, Southend Independent Forum and Thurrock Send Family Forum work really closely. We have formed the Essex Alliance, and we work closely together to promote strong parent carer voices in those projects that stretch across that footprint, to make sure that we're all working in the same way. We've got an agreed way of how we work, an agreed expectation about how we expect to work co-productively with our partners, and we're pleased to say that we are doing so very well on this project. And I think that it's clear that our parent voice is being heard in that process. Just skip to the next one. So in relation to what's going on, as I said, this is an established framework, but we've done, not only have we done some parent engagement, but Marie, Ros and her team have also gone out and spoken to schools and to settings, and they've had consultations which have showed a really great different variation across, and Marie has got a great way of feedback of stars and bugs, and what we've come is, when she's looked at what parents have said, what schools have said, and other settings have told us, what we've had some really positive feedback is about the therapists themselves, their high level of skill and knowledge, some of the high quality therapy plans and advice, and that therapies are approachable and communicate plans clearly. We're going to come to what the balance system is. It's just, I'm distracted by the chat that's come up, and some of the bugs. So what we're talking about bugs is some of the things that maybe don't work as well, those are the areas that we need to look at improving. So some of the bugs that Marie's identified from speaking to parents, to schools and to the various settings, is that systems don't allow for easy access. Schools do not have the skills needed to support some of the children's and young person's needs, that often there can be long waiting times for assessments, waiting times for therapy, and some age groups and clinical areas there is no service for that area. So that's really a lot of what the feedback has come back with, and I'm not going to go through all of this slide, but as I said, the slides will be made available. And I think when we've gone out, and this is just a few of the comments because we got hundreds of comments that Marie has gone through, and this is just a few of them that parents have come. And I think the main overarching comment is that the biggest problem was that everything is so complicated, and parents just didn't know how to access the right service at the right time, and they didn't always feel that they were getting the right support. So those comments will be there for you to read in depth, but I'm going to hand over to Kate and Ros now to introduce really the rest of the project. But I will hand over to Marie initially because she's got a hand up, as I'm sure she wants to jump in. Thank you.
Before we get into the geography, just on that point about the consultation and the surveys, and also I'm keeping an eye on the chat too. So if we haven't picked up any of your questions by the next sort of 20 minutes, then please keep reminding us that we still need to do that. So just going back, I think we could summarise this by saying therapists are fantastic when you get to them. The problem is you can't get to them when you want to and when you need to, and that's not really doing justice to, as Jo alludes to, the literally hundreds of responses that people have given. But those themes have come from everybody. So whether we're talking to parents, whether we're talking to early year settings, to schools, to FE. It's a common theme, and the therapists themselves would agree with that and share the frustration that they're struggling in a system that at the moment hasn't been that easy for them to navigate. So we'll pick up some of the issues around availability, etc., in a moment, if we may. But I just wanted to sort of sum it up in 2 sentences. Really, is great when you get there, but the getting there is the problem. Right, that was what I wanted to say. Over to Kate.
So I'll take us a couple of steps back as well. So I think the overriding message here is that everybody within the system knows that what we've got isn't good enough, and we've known that what we've got isn't good enough, and it's complicated for a few years, obviously. And I don't want to hang the pandemic out, but that actually had quite a massive impact on this, because the key stakeholders that were going to help us unpick this from the start, and those key stakeholders are parents, schools and therapists, during that pandemic period, were all otherwise distracted, taking care of your children at home. Schools were up in the air trying to work out how they were going to manage the children that were in school, and the therapists were my words left me. The therapists were redistributed and out working on COVID wards. There were, just coming back to, you know, the comment from Marie about the quality of the therapists that we have got in the system. There was a whole, throughout COVID, there was a whole load of mapping and questions and what services do the different therapy organisations deliver that had to be answered. And there were therapists that were doing that mapping whilst they were working on the COVID wards. So all through this, the system has been with us to try and start unpicking what we know isn't good enough, and it isn't working at the moment. The reason, some of the comments on the previous slide from the parents and carers, one of the biggest comments was that it was all so complicated. And I think working within it, we know that it's complicated, but it's not until we've started this kind of unpick that we see just how complicated it is. So we've kind of, here with this slide, just sets out the kind of the ways that we're working. So we've got 3 local authorities. We hold the statutory duty around the therapy provision in education, health and care plans under Section F. So we will be commissioning largely for Essex and Southend and Thurrock, we will be commissioning largely from the 5 providers, the main 5 providers of children's therapies across the system. We now have 3 integrated care boards, which from April, was it just April, Ross? Yeah, July. So before July, they were actually, let me see if I can count this up now. They were 7 clinical. No, yes, they were 7.
Yeah. 5 in Essex, 1 in Southend, and 1 in Thurrock.
Yes, so there were 7 clinical commissioning groups, each with their own management structures, people that we had to talk to, people that had to come on board. There are now 5 providers. When we started this, there were 6 main providers of therapy services. At the time when there were 6, 1 provider delivered speech and language, the other one did the OT and the physio. So we also had that split as well. Across the entire Southend and Essex footprint, we're looking at 800 plus schools and settings. I've not counted them all, there are a lot. That's including early years settings, FE colleges, special schools, enhanced provisions that are operating across Southend and Essex, and their voices need to be heard and they need to be engaged and actually understand how this works as well. We are working across approximately 530,000 children and young people aged 0 to 25. I think Marie might tell me if I've counted if we've done 0 to 25 or if we've done 0 to 19, and approximately what we do know is about 100,000 of those, just over, will have some kind of need that requires some level of support therapeutically from the system, not necessarily the support of a therapist in their purest sense, but will be needing some level of support from that very, very complicated system as a whole. So the fact that that complex geography doesn't actually work very well together at the moment and hasn't done is the reason why very largely it's not good enough. We have brought in Marie and the Better Communications team to come and help us unpick this. Marie originally likened it to an onion, that it is multi-layered, and every time you peel it makes your eyes water. And they have come along with we will use the words, the balance system. I'm trying to be honest, I'm trying to step away from it. The balance system is a product that Marie and her team have developed to help unpick therapy services and their delivery for local authorities like us. I liken it to a lid of a jigsaw box, and we are finding pieces of services that slot in. Marie will talk to you more about 5 strands and 3 levels. You will hear more about that shortly. But the balance system, when we talk about the balance system framework, it is the framework that we are using to provide the foundations for the Southend Essex and Thurrock therapy programme. The programme will deliver the changes that are needed to improve the services. So as we move forward with this journey, and it is a journey, and it's not a quick fix for what we're trying to do. As we move forward with the journey, we will be using more the Southend and Essex therapy programme because it's us and we own it. The balance system is simply the toolkit in the background that is helping us as commissioners and owners of the project understand how this is we are going to improve the services across this really, really complex geography. So I hope that's kind of cleared some of it up. If not, obviously, like we've said, come back to it. We'll come back to it again at the end. Joe, do you want to flick me on? Thank you. So, no, back one. That's it. So, as I've said, I've talked a bit about the complex geography. What that complex geography has resulted in is variable and inequitable, provision of therapy services right across the system. We know that there are complicated processes and gaps in the service offer, which Jo has alluded to, Marie alluded to earlier. And we know absolutely that that's impacting the achievement of positive outcomes for your children. So, as I've mentioned, what we're looking at doing is using the balance system framework to, we are using the balance system framework to join up all of the key stakeholders across Southend, Essex and Thurrock, and looking at the approach and remodelling of all of the therapy services and the way that they're delivered, not just at the specialist end, but actually what happens in schools and in settings, what goes on in colleges, how all of that works across Southend, Essex and Thurrock. We will be doing it through the joint ownership of those shared outcomes for children and young people. We've established a delivery partnership board where all of the key stakeholders from across that complicated footprint now sit, and we are using that delivery partnership to monitor the individual projects, and there are a lot of them that are taking us on our journey to make the improvements that we need to do. So what we are seeking is, as an outcome of this, is an equitable service model, a single service model. Currently, we have 5 providers that all do something slightly different. They all deliver different services to different children at different points of their levels of need. What we want is a service model that is consistent, and it ensures that the right support is available at the right time, but it's also delivered by the right people. In the right numbers. We haven't got enough therapists. There aren't enough out there at the moment at all. But that doesn't necessarily mean that therapists are the answer to all of this. And that's part of the unpick that we have to do. We need to know that there are the right numbers of people with the right skills to support your children across both Southend, Essex and Thurrock. Next one, Jo. Thank you. So how we're going to do this, what we're hoping to achieve for you and your children, is that we have a better understanding of the therapy needs of all the children, and that we know that we understand, we have got that better understanding now of the complex systems, but these are some old slides. We want a sustainable fit for purpose model that helps us takes us forward. The therapy services in Essex and across Southend and Thurrock have been through numerous changes in health land. We've split from 2 partnership trusts into 7 CCGs, back into 3 ICBs. Therapy services haven't kept up with that changing landscape. It hasn't kept up with the demand coming through for education, health and care plans that are coming through the local authorities. So we need to develop a service model that's consistent and that is sustainable and is fit for purpose, that takes us forward into the future. And we are hoping that the experiences for you and your children and the achievement of we're wanting to improve those experiences and the achievement of positive outcomes. So we're looking at ways, part of the conversations is how are we going to know? And this is where I think you will expect to be hearing from the parent carer forums. We will be looking over this next year about how do we know that the changes that we are making at one end of what's the impact. Marie will probably talk about impact and how we know that we're making it. We need to unpick all of that and develop all of those models and processes to know what it is that we're doing is the right thing, and that we keep doing more of what works and less of what doesn't, because that's the only way that we're going to be able to make these improvements. And I think finally, the one thing before I hand over to Marie is the fact that what we realise, and just the kind of, it's the final overlaying of what was that very complex geography at the top end, is that within that we also realise that everybody's journey is different. Jo, you didn't keep up with my slides.
Oh,
sorry.
I'm a terrible host. Sorry. There you go.
So there we and now she's jumped off. There we go. Yeah. So it's the knowledge that we've got, that within all of that with the stakeholders, that we know that everyone's journey is different, and that actually the systems need to be able to flex to accommodate that. That's why, as commissioners, we identified the balanced system and better communications as probably the toolkit that was going to help us do that. And I'm going to hand over to Marie now, finally, so she can explain to you why.
Okay, right, got myself off mute. I could take a long time or a short time to try and explain the framework. What we've decided to do today is to try and distill the key points, but there are things that you can watch on our YouTube channel that explain a bit more detail, and I'm actually going to pop a link in the chat to a little animation that sits in something else that we've produced that probably sums it up quite nicely in 2 minutes, which is better than I'm going to do in the next few minutes. So basically, as Kate calls it, the top of a jigsaw box, I call it, if you think about an inset puzzle where you put different shapes into it, it's giving the framework, literally giving the shapes, and then you've got to find the bits that fit together. So what we're trying to do is 2 things. The bit that I started to describe at the beginning that we've already done, and that the onion peeling, if you like, that we think we've got pretty good way into the centre, although there's always more, is around understanding the different patterns of need. But what we're trying to do with this framework is to put it into something that is common, that can be the same no matter where we're looking, in which part of Essex or Southend or Thurrock, or whether we're looking at speech and language needs or occupation and participation needs or physical and mobility needs, and ask some of the same questions so it's fair. So if you can move on to the next slide, please, Jo. Okay, so we talk about these 5 strands, and these are really 5 areas that are crucial in the whole system to get it right for our children and young people, regardless of which bit of the system they need, which therapy they need, and often many of them obviously benefit from all the therapies. So we start right and properly with what children, young people and their parents and carers need. And we want to make sure that the system has got, so this is our challenge to a system that we're working with, if you like. When we're doing the unpicking, the peeling of the onion, we're constantly checking and saying, well, does that answer this bit? Does that answer that bit? Oh no, there's a gap here. Has anyone got an answer to that anywhere in the system? Oh, well, there's an answer over in West Essex, but actually it's not the same in Tendring or whatever. So that's the sort of journey we've been on to do the unpicking. So the first thing we're asking is about what information is there to support you and to support older young people that are able to engage actively themselves in actually understanding the choices that they're being asked to make, and actually getting support of things that they can do for themselves, that you can do with your family, yourself, to actually enhance the skills that you're obviously concerned about. And each of these we think of at that universal level, at a targeted level, and at a specialist level. And I'll come back to that in a minute, but you need to kind of try and hold in your thoughts that we're talking about these five areas, but all of them have a graduation through those different levels. So there'll be things, when we talk about universal, we mean things that are relevant to absolutely anyone, that has a child, even if they don't appear to have any particular needs to start off with, or don't even go on to have any particular needs. There are still things as parents we all want to know about: how our children develop their language and communication, when they're going to start moving around and doing different things, and when we might expect them to be able to be more independent in terms of their self-care, things like dressing and buttons and all those sorts of things that you do as part of your journey to be independent as a child. So we all need to know those as parents. And then there are things that we need to know extra if our child is or young person is having a struggle in any of those areas. And then there are some children obviously who have very specific needs in those areas, and as parents you will want to know much more detail about what you can do as part of their whole journey. So that's the first strand. The second strand is around where our children and young people are, basically. So obviously at the very beginning and all the way through, that's with you. It's in the home, it's in your own family environment. But as they get older and they start to engage with other things in the system, it's about where they go to experience peer play and early years experience. It's where they go to have leisure. So if we're talking about across the piece, it's including things like our libraries, our leisure centres and places we can go to do various activities. And obviously it's talking about where we learn, where our children learn, and that as they get older obviously goes right the way through from early year settings through school on into further education or whatever the journey is that is appropriate for an individual. So we want to think about those environments as well and challenge those and say, okay, so how are we doing in our environments in order to, or how are they doing in terms of being as good as they can be to support the development of these skills? So these are all the underpinnings that are really crucial in the whole system. And so we, in all of the unpicking, we've been asking questions about, well, what support do we have in schools and settings to help early years practitioners and our teaching colleagues understand the difference it might make in the classroom or in the nursery if we organise the space slightly differently. Some children, and I know there's been various comments about your sensory needs, some children find it overwhelming if it's all too stimulating. Some children need to sit in a different place within their peer group in order to be able to engage more. And that's all relevant, because actually when I come on to talk about intervention as the last one, the intervention from the therapist is only actually as effective as the if you like, the environment it goes into and some of these other things. And that's where we start to think about the system being the responder, not just the therapy within that. So it's obviously a key part of it, which I'll come on to. So that's our environment part. So it's quite massive. That's epic, isn't it? Because there were so many different environments. We then also have a strand that is about the workforce, and that's absolutely everybody that's working with your children and young people in whatever capacity, through to those that have got those very specialist skills and knowledge. And it's about saying, again, challenging the system to say, well, do we have a good understanding in our early years workforce, in our schools workforce, in our places that we go for leisure? Is there a good basic understanding, again, if we're thinking at a universal level, just in terms of top tips for enabling communication, or top tips for helping children participate, through to, do we have people in our workforce that have really very well developed extra skills around some of these specific areas? And we need to think about that, because actually there is a shortage of therapists and there aren't enough to go around some of the time. But actually, even if you had a therapist daily welded to your child's side, that isn't going to be as impactful. That's the impact word that Kate said I'd get onto sooner or later. It's not going to be as impactful as making sure that, as well as whatever the specialist contribution is, everybody else knows what their contribution is. Because some of my therapy colleagues sometimes might look at me a bit strangely for saying this. No therapist of any discipline has ever actually completely got the solution for the child. They're part of the solution, really important parts, but they're not the whole answer. And more therapy sometimes isn't the whole answer. It's about making sure that it's also having that impact across all of these different areas that we're talking about. So that's our workforce bit, is right in the middle there, because it's really key that all the information is flowing in and out of the different bits of the workforce. So that is about training, it is about sharing skills, building confidence and competence, but it's also from a parent and carer point of view about having that confidence that the workforce is actually enabled to support your child. When it's not actually the therapist there all the time, because it will never be that, and nor should it be. We don't want our children to be dependent on us. We want them to be becoming more independent of needing that specialist support all the time. And then we come to the two that probably sound most familiar, because it's what everyone immediately leaps to, which is, are we identifying our children and young people effectively and quickly? So is it as efficient and accessible as possible? Are we identifying children early in terms of their needs? And that doesn't just mean very young, but also if somebody suddenly moves into the area, are they being identified speedily in terms of having just come into the environment within this particular footprint? And that also involves that universal and targeted level, as well as the specialist identification. Not everyone needs a specialist assessment to work out what will be a good support. Sometimes it's really obvious that actually there's something going on in a children's centre or in a family hub or in a school that actually would be immediately the right thing to help, even if it's not the whole solution. So why would you go through a long, complicated assessment and do nothing in the meantime, when you can signpost to that and get on with whatever else you might need to do? So it's about thinking slightly differently about how we identify those needs. And then finally, and absolutely crucially, it is about intervention and actually doing things. But again, it's thinking about that in terms of that universal targeted and specialist levels, and saying, yes, there are things that are very specialist. There are things that therapists do that are actually not that specialist, that could be done by other people. Some people might feel more confident if a therapist is doing it, but actually there's a whole big area in the middle of that targeted bit of that pyramid, and I'll use a pyramid in a second on another slide, that actually can be done by a number of people. And you as parents often get asked, I mean, even if you are taking your child to a more traditional therapy session, you will be obviously, as you will know, asked to reinforce and to back up what's being done in the therapy sessions all of the time. And that's the bit that actually makes the difference in terms of that impact. So they're the 5 strands that we talk about. So everything that we've captured has been against those 5 strands and at those 3 levels. So everything we've found out is happening or isn't happening, gaps or provisions, has gone into that framework in the analysis. So I hope that's, that makes sense. Okay, next slide, please, Jo.
Oh, I'm trying.
It's all right. I'll catch up in a second. Ooh.
Yeah, there.
There. Oh
no, now it's clicked too far. I don't think it likes me today.
That's all right. Okay, so that's was that the next one, or was there another one in between?
There we go.
There, thank you, perfect. So what this is trying to present is the difference between what might be called equality or equity in terms of the results, in terms of the outcome. So these images, I didn't make them up, I found them on the internet, but they do the job for me in trying to help explain this in terms of how we want to approach this. So what we're wanting to acknowledge is that obviously some children and young people don't need any help at all to be able to see over the fence and see what's going on the pitch in these two diagrams. So on the right hand side, you've got the tallest child there who actually doesn't need to stand on a box. So on the left hand side, they're given a box anyway, which is great. So they're a bit higher up. They might think, oh, I've got a better view from here. But actually, they don't actually need the box to get the job done, which is seeing the match. The child in the middle does need to stand on a box to see over. If they didn't have a box at all, they wouldn't be able to see. But the child on the right actually needs to stand on two boxes. And what we're trying to capture in this is the fact that the reality is that for the different therapy areas and across the geography, there are different levels of boxes needed for our children and young people to get to the same outcome. And if we're trying to be equitable in how the total public purse, if you like, is deployed to have the right therapies in place as part of this wider system, we need to think about understanding that need rather than assuming that equality just means we give a bit of the same to everybody. Because actually, if we do that, some of the children who might need two boxes are never going to get the two boxes, because actually there's children who don't need a box on a box. So we need to shift that around. So some of the work that's happening after the unpacking of the peeling of the onion that's going on right now is trying to work with this complex system, try and make it simpler, try and move it towards one way of working across the whole footprint, regardless of which provider is doing which bit of it, but also thinking around, well, maybe we just genuinely do need more of something in place A, or for particular type of need B in one part of the system than in another part of the system, and that's actually okay. So it's not feeling that somehow it's not there's more going on over here. Maybe there's more going on over there if that's how it looks, because actually there's more need over there than there is here. Now that's a difficult one to get right, and I'm not saying that we've got it, we certainly haven't got it right at the moment. That's the work that's going on right now to try and balance that out, and that's part of where the name the balance system came from. It was being, how can we actually understand the need well enough to then look at what the provision needs to be in that whole system and try and get the best match we can, acknowledging all the challenges in terms of all the different bits, in terms of funding, in terms of actual therapists to recruit, in terms of that wider system. So I hope that makes sense to people. Okay, next slide. Okay, now this is not so simple to look at, but we felt this one was probably quite important. So this, I was talking about pyramids, and here they are. So we've got these three triangles. So on the left-hand side, you've got a way of saying, if we take all of the children and young people in the whole of the set footprint, the Southend Essex Thurrock footprint, there will be a chunk of those children, a great number, the majority even, who have absolutely no additional needs. So they don't need a box. And they sit in that bottom bit of that purple triangle. There will be some, quite a big number, that sit in that middle bit. Now, Kate had a figure. That figure comes from some modelling. It's not an actual, we know there are over 100,000 children and young people that need some sort of support. It's a prediction based on all of the research evidence that we've got out there in the field, and then looking at the actual Southend Essex Thurrock population and the needs of the population, looking at things that affect what we can predict is in an area. And that includes things like areas that are more disadvantaged than others, where there might be more challenges in terms of the schools and settings, that the access to those, etc. So it's lots of factors go into that. So it's not saying there's 102,000 children out there that need a therapist, definitely not. It's saying that we predict that the system has got a significant number, and that's about 20% actually over the whole picture. But what we'll see if we were looking at a more detailed map is that there might be 35% predicted to be in one part of that footprint, but maybe only 10 or 15% in another part of the geography. So that big bit, that sum is a big bit, it's big numbers, but those children are not necessarily the ones that would sit in the very top, who might be the children, young people who might have an EHCP. They might not. You can still be very complex and needy and not have an EHCP, as many of you will know, and nor should you, if the system's right. Fewer children should actually require an EHCP to have their needs met, and that's a different debate, but that's also why that triangle is not kind of drawing hard lines between criteria of saying that means you're here or there. But so there's a big bulk in the middle, and there's a relatively smaller number that sit in the top. So that's our children, young people, your children, young people. The middle bit is trying to represent all of the things that could be out there in that offer. So that intervention offer, from strategies, and try not to be distracted by the chat, but keep an eye. But there's somebody talking about good information that's out there, for instance, around neurodiversity. So there's lots of things that are out there universally that are strategies to support parents and schools and other professionals around just good practice generally. Then there are things to do with targeted offer, which is that bit that we were describing, that there's some things that we do that are actually quite predictable, that we can say, you know, children, if I speak from a speech and language point of view, children are always going to need to have good vocabulary knowledge to be able to do their best at learning. Now that might mean something very different for one child who's got a very complex language disorder from somebody who's maybe got a lesser need or a transitory need, that's potentially because maybe they didn't have enough opportunity, especially, and we're finding this post-COVID, it's particularly, maybe they didn't have the opportunity to go to nursery and chat with other children when they were sort of 2.5, 3, and that's impacted on their vocabulary, but they will probably catch up quite quickly once the right intervention's in place. So we've got that sort of thing that sits in the middle, and then at the top we've got those specialist things that absolutely go on as part of that intervention journey. On the right hand side, we've got everybody in the workforce. So that's literally everyone we've talked about. We've got those that have had some extra training. So that might be teaching assistants that have had additional training. It might be some of our specialist teaching colleagues that have got expertise in specific areas. And they will be sitting in the specialist box as well, in terms of that pyramid around different areas. So a whole range of people that have enhanced skills, and indeed parents that do additional training. I know lots of parents take on a huge amount of knowledge and skills development around supporting their children. And then you've got the specialist workforce, which are the ones that are defined as, you are the specialist in speech and language, you are the specialist in physical mobility issues or occupation and participation. Now, the lines that are going backwards and forwards across this, and I'm sorry I'm taking a bit of time on this, but it's really, really crucial, is trying to really emphasize the fact that it isn't a straight linear relationship. It doesn't go across the top line. Might be true some of the time for some children, but actually, if we're going back to this impact word, what's really, really important is that we've got this flexibility, because sometimes a child who is described as quite complex and may well have an EHCP, actually to get them to be able to see over the fence in their particular context, what they might need loads of is really good targeted intervention several times a day, every day, given by somebody who's actually in their system every day with them. Whereas for somebody else who might be sitting in that middle bit on the left-hand side, in the sum bit, they might have one of those, if they got a quick catch-up, that would be them sorted sort of situations, where actually giving them a burst of specialist intervention delivered by a specialist is job done. And that's absolutely the right thing to be able to do. And equally, some of our universal offer is often best delivered by the information being given directly from the horse's mouth, if you like, from the specialist into the system. So that's just to sort of reflect that it's not a one size fits all. Okay, next slide, Joe, and I'm conscious of time, so I'll crack on. I've only got one more slide, I think. Yeah, so this is just summarising essentially that what we were trying to do here then is create we talk about pathways, pathways are a very popular term in various different bits of the system, but actually what we're very much saying is we don't want pathways to become so rigid that it's more like being in a carriage on a train that's going somewhere, and actually you can see that there's something really helpful to you that's just off to the side in the siding, or you want to go up a branch line and you can't because you're stuck in this pathway. So what we were trying to do here is build this system with the therapy teams, with the commissioners that are funding and commissioning all of this activity on the ground, with schools and settings who are delivering really the bulk of the experience in terms of the contact time, if you like, is have we got all of the stepping stones in place so that for an individual, you can actually pick the best route, because to get from A to B for one family might be a different journey than for the others. And Kate had her footprints. This is my pathway to go on those footprints. So it's just saying that we're not trying to build a one size fits all. We're trying to build something flexible, and that's really hard. So it's not the easy choice to go down this route. Okay. So before I hand over to Ros, there's two more things I want to say. Ros is going to take us through the journey. I'm going to try and put an image in the chat, because there's a slide that I thought after the event might be helpful, but I'm not able to do that. Okay. So what I am going to do, however, though, just very quickly in the chat, is put a link to a site that you might want to visit, where there's an animation that I talked about. There we go. That is a little animation that sums up basically everything that I've tried to describe as to what the framework actually is. So you can have a look at that if you want to afterwards. Oh, and it's popped up in the Menti. That's terrifying. Okay, right, over to Ros.
Don't worry, it's fine. We'll make sure that everyone gets the link, and we'll also try and make sure that we share that alongside the recording of today and the slides. So any more useful information, we'll get that from Marie, and we will make sure that we've shared that. So if you don't catch the links, remember to write them down today. Don't worry, we will promise we will share them with you, and it won't get lost. So thank you very much. Over to Ros.
Hi, I'll do this very quickly because I know we're running out of time. Just to introduce myself again, so I'm Ros French. I work in the NHS, mainly in West Essex, but I'm representing my colleagues across Essex, Southend and Thurrock. I commission services for children, and I co-lead this programme with Kate from Essex County Council. So we do this very much as a partnership. So this was just a timeline following on actually from what Joe touched on at the beginning around some of the timelines, just to show the journey that we've gone on so far. So you can see there that we started all of this back in February, started the conversations, and by March we had a commitment that we wanted to carry out a big review of therapy services across it. At the time it was just Essex. You'll see my COVID little virus there, because that's, as you recognise, in March 2020, that's when the first lockdown happened, and everything kind of had to pause for a moment. So we didn't really pick it up again until August, where we were able to then, actually form the way forward, bring everything together, start planning, start engaging with all the providers, and at that point Southend asked if they could join the journey with us. Quite quickly, we, again, there were a few times, you may remember, that Christmas we had another lockdown and lots of other things happening. However, despite that, we still carried on, and we started looking at that whole understand phase. So doing a lot of collecting information about our local population, the needs of the children, the services that we commission via the local, the NHS and local authorities, how we access them, what they offer, all of those sort of details. We worked with the Essex Family Forum and Southend Forum just to kind of identify when would be the best time to engage with parents. And it wasn't until the May that we felt actually, we'd gone through an awful lot with the pandemic. Parents had dealt with so much, but that was the time when we felt actually that it might be a little bit of headspace to start engaging. So there are a number of events, some questionnaires, and we were, in between that time, Essex Family Forum and Southend were also carrying on with their graffiti walls that we were trying to pull some information from as well. And then there was a lot, period of analysis, doing a lot of deep diving, looking at other gaps that came up. As we talk about this onion, we kept finding new layers that we wanted to explore, and then we had to then start thinking, okay, now we've got all of this, where do we go next? So by probably around January, February time earlier this year, we then started planning the way forward, and then we started a conversation with Thurrock around, let's look at this from a whole Essex, Southend and Thurrock approach. So Thurrock joined us earlier this year, as we discussed, and we've done a little bit of catch up to understand their area, to add it on to the rest of all the information that we had. And we're now at the point, you can see the green boxes at the bottom, where we're starting to have some working groups to really unravel the information and decide how we're going to use this to redesign our services going forward. And we're starting to engage with the wider system as well, and part of that is this event today. The plan is to, we've got these working groups will carry on for another quite a few months to do a lot of work over the rest of this academic year, because we're thinking about September will be the time when we'll start implementing much of the change, and then we'll be constantly monitoring it, constantly improving it. I think that's everything in terms of the journey, but it's been a long journey, and we've had lots of challenges along the way because of the pandemic, because of other things that have been going on, and but we've, despite that, we've really tried to push this forward, and it's been I have to say, a great thank you to all the parents and carers that have engaged with us so far. We're really grateful, and we've been really grateful for all the engagement from our providers as well, who have, despite all the pressures they're under, they can see the journey, they can see where we want to get to, and we're going to make a better service for everybody.
Lovely, thank you very much, Ros. I'm sure that you've now got some questions, and what we wanted to do really is use the last few minutes of our session, and I know we're due to finish in 5 minutes, but hopefully we can see if we can stay on for an extra few minutes and just see if we can get some of your questions answered. So what we're going to do is, if you want to go, and if you've got any questions and any feedback, please, and actually not just questions, if you just want to say what you think about the session today, or if you've got any thoughts that you want to share with us, anything that you want to say, do use Menti. So www.menti.com and use the code 78133491, and pop that on there. Kate, if I just want to...
Yeah, I was just going to say, also, couldn't we, if there are... So yeah, comments about the day, any questions, but also any ideas and suggestions about how we can get you involved. Obviously, we're going to come out through the family forums, but we need this. So we'll start hopefully implementing changes from September 20th, from next September, but it will still be it's going to be a gradual change. There will be some changes, but we will continue to improve, and it's about understanding how we can get the parent voice on that journey, how the innovative ways that we can get you involved, what that looks like, and so how the family forums can work with you around this to kind of consistently keep your voice heard. That would be great.
Okay, I'm just going to pick up with a question in the chat before we come to Menti. So if I can just ask any questions, please use, Sarah's just put the link to Menti in the chat, and use the code. If you're not confident with Menti, do put your comments in the chat and we will pick them up now. Just before we come to Menti, there is a question that Paula asked when we were talking about the early intervention for families. Is there a plan to share that with families for a child waiting for therapy? So I think from my understanding, there's lots of talk about making sure that we've got the right resources and access and information to support families. And Paula, did you want to just to explain your question just slightly, and then we can ask Marie and Kate to answer that for you?
Yeah, so I mean, it's useful for the families here to understand what's coming down the track, but just thinking that would be useful for all families that are either expecting therapy through an EHCP or on a waiting list to see someone, to kind of proactively be told what the where this is going, and timelines around this.
There is a website that actually complements the project that I can't remember where the web link is, that all of the journey. So it's originally had the link to the graffiti walls in for the consultation. So there is an Essex Commissioners section on the balance system website. We'll find the web link and give it to you, and it has all of the program updates on it. It will have the timelines. So it was created at the beginning of this to do exactly that, Paula, so that link is there. So I think what we'll look to do on the back end of this is refresh that, make sure we've got all of the updated information on it, and that it's circulated out through the parent carer forums regularly, so that we've got that communication channeling. So that's always been there. It probably just needs a bit of a refresh.
Is it worth going to everybody on the wait lists as well? as via the parent care forums? Because I mean, I didn't know that was there. Obviously, I'm
we can pick that up with the provider teams and get it circulated out that way as well. So no, that's a good call.
I think we shared the link. We've shared the link a lot. The 3 parent care forums have shared it, especially when we were doing around the original engagements last year. But I think that it's definitely good to reshare that.
Yeah.
And I think we as parent care forums will take that action back with Kate. And again, I agree with your point, Paula, we need to make sure that we are sharing that widely because not everyone will know about the parent carer forums. So I'm going to come to a couple of the questions, just to pick one up. The dynamic support register in Essex and who can refer to it. That's not part of this work, but please do feel free to contact Essex Family Forum at the end of it. And we will be able to support you with that question, but that doesn't form part of this piece of work. I think there's been a lot of chat, a lot of comments, Kate, around the people wanting to see the difference now and that they feel September is too far off. How did you, I mean, it's a complicated system, isn't it? So I think we're all in agreement. We'd like this work to be happening now and parents to feel the impact of the work now. And we keep talking about the word impact.
Yeah.
But Kate, perhaps you wanted to share why it is going to be in September.
Well, I think at the moment, well, we're talking about September as the view to you know, some of the things that are being talked about at the moment is about single point of access across the footprint. There are some huge structural changes that we are seeking to make in the ways that actually out there in the system therapies are delivered, and those structural changes take time. It's not been anything that's been on the agenda or been looked at by any of the stakeholders for as long as I can recall. So this is something that is huge and big. It is big and it is structural. Those changes will take time. However, there are smaller projects that are in line that are working, but there are smaller projects, kind of test and learn projects that are already up and running. We've got projects that are being delivered, communication hubs that are being set up in the tendering area. We've got advanced sort of changes in delivery models, in enhanced provisions in West Essex, outreach services that are being created in West Essex from our enhanced provisions. There are small and incremental changes that are happening now. And it's those small test and learn changes that will take place across Essex. The problem is, and it's, I'll be honest, Essex's downfall is that we are so big. If we were a small London borough with 12 schools, 1 clinical commissioning group, 1 provider team, this wouldn't be a conversation that we were having. I will be very, very honest with you, but we're not. We are the 3rd largest local authority in the country. We've got huge numbers of education, health and care plans, and we've got a really complex footprint that we're working under. And yeah, it has. There are systems in place. If you've got consent, if your child has an education, health and care plan, and you don't think that they're receiving the therapies that are written in that plan, then you need to contact your send ops teams. We've got systems in place. We can see what we can see. This is the problem. Sat at the centre of that big complex system, we can see what we can see. If there are gaps in provision that you are aware of, that we are not aware of, then let your send ops teams know. If you want to come into the family forums, then they've got strong links with us, they can let us know. And so it's, unfortunately, we want to be able to make the small incremental changes that will have the immediate impact, but actually over the years that's been done a lot, and that's just layered to the onion, to be honest. What we're trying to do now is restack the system so that we've got something that's future proofed and able to support us as we move forward. Yeah.
I'm just conscious that there's lots of questions in the chat. And I'd like to just, if possible, Marie, and I know you've got your hand up, but I'm just conscious that it would be really good I know we've talked a lot about the system and how it's working, but there's some questions that I think would be really good. Things like, do we have to have a diagnosis to access therapies? Don't know if either of you wanted to.
Okay. Kate, shall I leap in?
Yeah, no, do you want to do that one?
Okay, there's a couple of things. I've managed to navigate the chat a little bit, and there's a diagram I put in there that was the slide I probably should have included, but we could put it into the pack before it gets circulated, which is around the work that is happening now. So there are things happening now, and I appreciate there's also the comment saying that that's not how it feels. I can understand that too, because as Kate has explained, there are 800 plus settings where things need to happen, and they won't all be happening straight away. Where we are right this minute is that there are plans already to phase in. So we're talking about September 23, not as a cliff edge, but as a point of reference with things happening through this year as they unfold. Kate's alluded to a couple of things there already. But for instance, the therapy teams are looking at rolling out better access in the early years and having drop-ins where people can go and pitch up without a formal referral and actually talk to a therapist and get some either reassurance or be progressed into something more. That's being looked at practically how that can happen. That is right on the agenda right this minute. They're meeting this afternoon, in fact, to pick up on, to continue that work. They meet every Wednesday afternoon to try and work out the actual doing of it, and that's the bit that's happening in the it's not happening everywhere straight away. It couldn't possibly, but that is actually active at the minute. In terms of school age, there's a move to work out how to have a very clear link therapist representing the therapies. It may not be one of each therapy. It might be a therapist representing all three in some instances, working with every school. This is about mainstream schools, absolutely, not just special schools. That's being worked on at the moment in terms of easy access and also being place-based. And the little diagram I've popped in the chat is showing you essentially what the key working groups are right this minute. So there's something about measuring impacts, because it isn't all about numbers of minutes and hours. It's actually, I know that's important once you've secured that and it's a statutory obligation, but actually those minutes and hours have to deliver the change that you're aspiring to and your young person or child is aspiring to. And if that isn't happening, then those minutes and hours aren't doing the right thing. So it's also about looking at how we measure. Someone's asked about how we're measuring our work. That's fair comment. As part of how we're measuring our work is indeed by your feedback, and clearly for some people they're not feeling it yet, and that's important to know. But there are measures of actually what change this is making. So we're setting measures up now, baselines now, to measure that change in terms of access, in terms of waiting lists going down, in terms of access being quicker for people. There's something around the therapists working collaboratively with the system and not being necessarily based entirely in health settings and getting out there into settings so that they can actually talk to colleagues in the wider workforce, etc. And there's that targeted offer. And then there's the information bit, which absolutely is crucial. So they're the core elements. So in terms of some of these questions, so do you need a diagnosis to get support? Well, in a sense, no, not at the universal level. There should be information that's useful that you can be directed to by potentially a whole range of people in the system. We want to get to a point where if you went into school and spoke to your Senko, they would be able to signpost you to information that's out there that they can share with you that might be reassurance enough for a time, or things to do for a time, and then decide whether you still need to feel that you want to talk to an actual therapist in a formal referral kind of a way. Right, I'm just trying to scan these.
Shall I pull out a couple for you, Marie? So someone's mentioned, will GPs have this information, as often that's the first point of call for families?
Absolutely, GPs will have this information. They are already included in circulations, but so for instance, the easy access drop-in facilities would be typically advertised on posters that could be everywhere from a library to a GP surgery, and obviously told, GPs being made aware of those. Interestingly, referrals into the system, GPs are one of the smallest referrers. The predominance are actually our health visiting colleagues, early years colleagues and school colleagues, which is quite an interesting one. So GPs are absolutely crucial, but they're often not the first port of call, ironically.
That's lovely, thank you. And we've got here, someone's asked about how they would get involved as they've not seen anything in Southend. I just want to clarify, we did the engagement session in Southend last year. we continue to get feedback from coffee mornings, etc. Should we write on the graffiti wall if you're in Essex? We can't take your feedback in Essex, but please do continue to give your feedback to your Parent Carer Forum in Southend. And we are looking, one of the reasons that we wanted to talk to you today, and as Kate said, we do want to know how we can continue. We don't want to just put on another engagement session and that not be the right thing for you. So if you want to get involved, please use the contact details at the end, and we will let you know of what our next steps are. And we were going to be discussing what the next steps are and how we engage. It's something we've had lots of conversations about, and we're keen to agree on that going forward. Lots of conversations about, will we see the slides? Yes, we will be sharing the slides. I'm just very quickly just trying to be mindful of what we can answer. I know there's a lot of comments in here.
Can I just come over about some of the timings, Jo? So
yes,
just to say, so we are last week we held our very first wider system engagement session. So that was the first opportunity that we basically did a session very similar to this to all of the schools. Well, the invites went to schools and settings, to health visiting teams, to social care OTs, to enhanced provisions, to anybody that we could possibly think of that were, and the family forums were engaged as well. That was the first session that we had with the wider system. Until then, we've been working very closely with the therapy providers to understand what they're doing, where they're doing it, how they're doing it, as we've talked about. The session last week that the Better Communication team ran was the first opportunity that we've sort of gone out to the wider system, and actually and this is now the first session that we've had through the Parent Carer Forums to sort of start bringing you on the journey. So over this next year, you will start hearing more, which was why at the beginning I was talking about the interchangeability of the balance system and the Essex, Southend and Thurrock therapy programme, because you will hear both and they are both the same thing. So over this next year, there will be further engagements, there will be more information coming out, and we will be linking some of these smaller projects that are already running and taking the learning from it and actually putting that out, so via the website that we discussed earlier. So there will be more noise coming out from this shortly.
Just want to pick up what some people want to hear about, wanting to perhaps see some of the answers, and I'm mindful of time, we might not be able to get everything through today. And what I will suggest, and I'm hopeful that my colleagues on this call as partners in this project will agree, what we will do is perhaps look at doing some form of frequently asked questions, picking up what your questions are and putting a response, and we will look at putting that on the balance system page that Marie has on her website to make sure that your questions are answered if we've not been able to get them today. As I said, this presentation will be loaded and we will work as a team to make sure that your questions are answered. So if you do have questions that haven't been answered, or you've gone away today and you think, I never asked that, I really wish I had, let us know, and we will work over the next few weeks to get something up for you on the balance system website, and we will share it as Parent Carer Forums. We'll make sure that that information is in parent carer friendly language, and it will hopefully give you some of the answers. I'm just trying to pick up some of the actual questions that we can answer, and it's difficult to provide answers on individual cases, and I know there's been some individual comments in the chat. We're talking about other therapies available, so we're talking about, will parents be able to receive funding for other therapies that are proven to work, like animal therapy, art therapy, outdoor therapy, that are not commissioned widely. Kate, I don't know if you wanted to pick up something around that, because that probably doesn't necessarily form a specific part of this work, but is more individual commissioning for EHCPs.
It's at the moment, so we don't. So there are other therapies. So hang on, I'm just reading the question.
For those of Pete, for the recording. You mentioned other therapies available. Will parents be able to receive funding for other therapies that are not proven that do work, such as animal therapy, art therapy, outdoor learning, that are not currently commissioned?
So they won't come under the banner for this project. This banner is looking specifically at speech and language, OT, and physiotherapy. And it's, I think, so when we're looking at the other therapies, so we're talking about more holistic therapies, and the difficulty we have even with this, with the scope of this project, is about the evidence base. And we will always, as a local, all local authorities will come back to that evidence base. At the moment, these are out of scope for this project.
People are talking about delivering top tips and training, etc. I know we've had many conversations within our steering group that we are going to be looking at developing when we're talking about parents help, that really sort of comes under that sort of universal and targeted support. We're doing lots of work around that. I don't know, Kate, if you wanted to mention that there is a lot of work going on about access for early intervention.
Yeah.
And also as well, if you could just talk about maybe some of the plans that we're doing to get that information and advice right for parents and young people, but also if you wanted just to perhaps touch upon what work you're doing with schools. Someone mentioned here around schools, and yeah.
So
what work you're doing with schools.
Yeah, so just very briefly, and the difficulty with this is it does, so where we're talking about schools, I can only talk about the work that we do for Essex schools. So obviously, therefore, the local authority colleagues from Southend and Thurrock may be doing something that meets the same outcomes but slightly different for Southend and Essex schools, Southend and Thurrock schools. Even I get confused. So, okay, so in terms of universal information at the moment, we're working with the therapy teams at the moment closely to understand what information they have available from the mapping that Marie did at the beginning of all of this. What we do know is that there is a whole wealth of information out there held separately by all of the different therapy teams. What we discovered from doing that mapping and the engagement with parents was that actually sometimes we think parents struggle to find it. So we're working with the therapists initially to understand and streamline some of that information. There's working groups been held this week, there's working groups next week around looking at the information that's held, how we can make it, how we can standardise it, where we can put it. It ties to the work that Essex are doing around the redevelopment of the local offer. So there's all these different kind of, like I say, it is like a big jigsaw that we're joining up. We will be we're working with therapists first to try and look at what they have, and then we'll be working with the parent carer forums and yourselves to create a parent mirror. What we want is something consistent in terms of the universal information that is out there. That will be an ongoing piece of work, because actually while we're at the beginning of the journey of changing the system, obviously the information that complements the way that the system works will evolve over time. So we're starting now, but we're very conscious that we may end up in a very different place when we finish the work that we're doing, and we sort of start implementing in 23. So the work around with schools, the link with schools for Essex schools is that we are working with Essex schools over this next year and developing an ordinarily available offer. The ordinarily available offer for schools will be, it sets out the expectations of Essex schools around inclusion. That ties with I've just seen the question about sensory needs. It will do. The work around the ordinarily available and the tie for this project is that the ordinarily available in schools and the support that schools need potentially to support and deliver the ordinarily available expectations around inclusions. Some of that support comes from therapists and comes from training and universal information from therapists. So that all ties back to the information that we're developing. So that work is in train, it is being done. It will have a parent mirror, as I've said, and it will coordinate with the ordinarily available that is being developed for schools over this next year as well. The parent stuff will be available via the local offer, which is being developed at the moment. We've got in Essex, we've got a lot of projects that complement and kind of butt up against each other, but we are all heading in the same direction. Just to pick up on the sensory needs, yes, the balance system does include sensory needs in the same way as I've just talked about universal information around. Marie's touched on strategies and information around interventions that can be used. Sensory needs are being picked up under the OT stream as well.
Lovely. I'm just really mindful we've overrun by 20 minutes, so we'll just have one final closing point. But what we will do is leave the Menti board open. So if you haven't been able to ask your question, please do put it on here. And as I said, what we will do as a team is we will go through all of the feedback from today. I don't want people to feel that their questions haven't been answered or you've not been given the right response. Today obviously was us just trying to explain to you that the work that's gone on, and we do need to work out how we can move forward and engage with parents and carers around the support that's needed. But we want to assure you that your voice was very much heard. When we originally started the engagement, we went out and spoke to parents about what their needs were, what their access to therapy was like. We really went and did a lot of work around understanding what parents and carers need for therapy was, what their experience was, and that was used to inform these sessions. I'm just Marie, I don't know if I want to give you the final closing point on today, but just again, if you can, anything else, please pop it on there. We will come back to you. It will take us a week or so just to go through all of the information and make sure that we can give you the right response. But Marie, if I can hand over to you, and also if I can just take a moment to thank Kate and Ros for coming along and supporting us with giving this presentation, and to my colleagues in Southend and Thurrock, who I know have been working equally as hard on this project as well to try and raise what's important to parents. And Marie, if I can give you your final thoughts for closing, please.
So first of all, apologies to anyone that feels this has not been what they needed and has been patronising. I think my overarching comment is we clearly needed a lot longer. So what I would be personally happy to commit to is absolutely answering the questions. We can put some responses to all the individual questions together in a whole set, and through the family forums that can be circulated. Obviously, Kate and Ros will have some of those, won't be within my gift to answer, but the ones that are about either the framework or the ambitions of the framework, I'm very happy to do that. What I would say is that this is about turning a tanker. It is huge. I absolutely hear and feel the anxiety and the angst of those that are not experiencing what they would like for their children right now. There is not an easy answer to that. It's on a journey. We are doing our best to support the system, but as Kate has also explained, the system now needs to take this on, and it is doing so, but it is epic. And I'm guessing that for those that feel that that's not a satisfactory answer for today, that's not going to change that opinion, and that's absolutely fine. I think we're on a journey. I think if the family forums are happy to perhaps think about running another session and you're willing to give more of your time, we can come back maybe having had the answers to the questions that have been asked today disseminated, and then take the conversation a bit further. That's, to me, that was a very sensible way to go.
If you would like to put in the comments what you want from the session, tell us. If we, today was about us coming out and telling you what the work we've been doing and saying how do you want us to engage going forward. So if you want another session, as I said, we're happy to work, but tell us what you would like that session to look like so that we can make sure that we're getting it right for you. I think that would be tell us what you need, and then we will work to make sure that we are delivering what you're asking for. I think, if that's all right, Marie. Sorry, carry on. I just wanted to reiterate that. We welcome your feedback on that.
Yeah, I think that's it really. There's, clearly there's this is the beginning of a conversation, and not the end of a conversation. So we need to respond to the questions that have been asked, share the information, and then, as Jo says, set up something further, or probably more than one further thing over the next year, that is what you want as parents. And I think if you can help us with that, that would be the way to go.
Lovely, thank you very much. Kate, Roz, did you have any final thoughts before I close?
So no, I think Marie's captured, what we want to do. We want to make this and bring you on the journey with us. We would like to be able to fix it all now, if we could, but we can't. And so we want to be able to take you on the journey with us and make sure that you're helping us to do what is needed to kind of make this system work better in the future. The other thing that I was just wanting to add that I don't think we've picked up on at all, though, is that that the children are also being engaged as well. So we are looking at making sure that the children's voice is within this as well. So we're trying to work across and make sure that all voices are captured. So yeah.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for your time today. We will email all of those attendees out when the recording's live with a link to the recording, and we will get the slides out, and we will get the frequently asked questions out. So please do keep an eye on the Facebook links for the 3 parent carer forums, but we will also follow up with an email to those of you that attended and those of you and for those that booked on but were unable to attend today, when the information is available for you to see, which should be over the next couple of weeks. Thank you very much for your time, everybody, today. We really appreciate it, and hopefully we will see you at any ongoing event. And please do keep in touch with us, and we will make sure that we keep in touch with you, and we will try and email when we do set something else up. We'll keep a note of your email addresses as long as that's okay with you, and we'll email you about future events to make sure that if you do miss it being advertised, that you're cited on it as well. So thank you very much, parents and carers and those support groups that have come today. Really appreciate your time. Thank you very much. Bye, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.